Hey y'all, welcome or welcome back to my channel. Welcome to my August reading wrap up. August was an okay reading month for me. I feel like I rated all the books I read just all across the board. I did have one book that I just really didn't care for. The majority of the books I read, I would say, fell somewhere in like the 3 to 4 star range, and there were things I liked, things I didn't like. I felt kind of in between about them, but most of those I would still recommend to you guys. A couple books that I really loved, really enjoyed, but unfortunately no 5-star favorites in the month of August. The beginning of the month started out really strong. I was in such a reading mood and just reading so many books back to back to back, and I thought it was going to be a really good reading month in terms of quantity. But the second half of the month I kind of fell off because I was just so busy, so I didn't really have as much time to read. I also started about 3 different reading vlogs in the month of August that kind of took different directions. I kind of didn't know what I wanted the theme to be, so it evolved a few different times, but all the video ideas that I planned just kind of hit dead ends when I dropped off on my reading the second half of the month. So that's why I didn't post any reading vlogs and not as many videos in the month of August. But I do have quite a few videos and vlogs planned for September that I'm very excited about. So I thought I would just go ahead and film my wrap up. I don't think any of the vlogs that I started are going to surface on my channel. Maybe potentially I could throw them into a video next month. But for now, this wrap up is going to be the only place you hear me talk about all the books I read last month. So with that, let's hop right in. The first book of the month that I read, I actually started this in July, and I filmed my July reading wrap up pretty early, so I thought that I was definitely going to finish this in July and then just tack it on to the beginning of my August wrap up. But I ended up not even finishing it until like the first few days of August, so it ended up working out. This book follows our main character, Sam. She is engaged to be married to this guy named Jack, so they end up going to her family's beach house in Long Island to tour this wedding venue there. But when she's there, her ex-boyfriend from her childhood, who she like grew up with every summer, who lives next door, Wyatt, is also there for the summer. So we do get both Sam and Wyatt's perspectives, and it is dual timeline. So we see Sam and Wyatt's relationship in the past, we see Sam in present day with her new fiance Jack, and we kind of see what happened between Sam and Wyatt, why they aren't together anymore, and some of the things that Sam is dealing with in her personal life outside of her romantic relationships, like her family, her job, things like that. I ended up giving this book 3.5 stars. I love Annabelle Monaghan's writing style. It's very like concise, but it also just gives you the perfect amount of information. This one was interesting for me because childhood friends to strangers to lovers is my very favorite trope, and that's exactly what this book was. But I don't know if I necessarily loved the execution of the trope in here. I feel like Annabelle Monaghan's writing style just didn't necessarily work for me with this trope. I feel like the things we were being told about the characters in here were very deep things that added depth and layers to them and to the story, but the way it was being told, I felt like the delivery was kind of surface level, so I never got super invested in their lives or in the story. The same thing that happened in Nora Goes Off Script for me kind of happened in this book as well, where it took a little bit to get into, but then something unexpected happens that really pulls you in and makes you need to know what's gonna happen and really push through to the end. I feel like this one was a little bit slower for me than Nora Goes Off Script. It was definitely one of those books where I was like counting the pages and ready to come to a stopping point and put it down. And when I was reading it, I didn't get like swept up or lost in the book. I very much felt like I was reading a book. Like it felt very fictional, the characters. I did really like the things that were revealed in this book. They kind of made everything make sense, and I liked the way everything came together in the end. But I will say there was one reveal involving Sam and her work life. It just felt so silly to me when you find out what's going on with her job. I'm like, wait, is this for real? Like, it was just so ridiculous that it actually pulled me out of the story, and I just couldn't stop thinking about it. I was like, this is so out of place in this book. Like, why is this in here? It makes no sense. But overall, I did like the relationship in here, and I really wanted them to be together, and I was excited to see how things were going to play out and what was going to happen. Definitely very good like summery beachy vibes, and I still would recommend it, just not a favorite for me. And then I actually listened to the audio of Mixed Signals by B.K. Borison. This is the 3rd book in the Love Light Farm series. This book follows Layla and Caleb, who are characters that we were introduced to in previous books. Caleb was a police police officer in this town. And then Layla is the baker who owns this bake shop on Lovelight Farms. They both kind of reveal to one another when they're venting that they're really struggling in their dating lives and they're having trouble finding a romantic partner. They agree to fake date one another to kind of give each other tips on dating, help one another out. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. I definitely don't think the audiobook is the way to go with this one. The narrators just did not work for me. The narrator for Layla was like my biggest issue with the book. It really bothered me because she had a southern accent and I was like, oh, I was so thrown off. I was like, I had no idea that Layla was a southern character from the South. Maybe we'll get her backstory, like why she moved to Lovelight Farms, which is located in Maryland. But no, you find out these characters are born and bred in Maryland, which they should not have really heavy southern accents. I know so many people from Maryland and none of them have a southern accent. So it just really threw me off and took me out of it and didn't fit at all. I don't think my rating would have changed that much. I don't think it would have been that much higher if I read the book physically. But I will say the book was kind of slow and a little boring for me in parts. So in that sense, the audiobook kind of helped me get through it, where I feel like if I was reading the physical book, I don't know, it would have been maybe a little bit slower and harder to push through. I wasn't really sure what to think going into this one because I absolutely loved book 1 in this series, Lovelight Farms, which is the winter book. Book 2 is the spring book, which I read back in the spring this year, and it's actually one of my least favorite books that I've read this year so far. So I was like, I don't know. Book 3 could be a hit or a miss. I'm just gonna have to find out, but it takes place in the summer, so I did really want to read it in the summertime. I felt like the audiobook would be the safe way to go since I got it from the library. It was no risk. I didn't have to like pay for the physical book or anything, and I'm glad I did that since it wasn't my favorite thing. Usually I like fake dating a lot. I can't think of a time where I haven't really liked it, but in this instance, it just felt super cliche and forced, and I kind of wish there was like a better reason for why they were fake dating. It just felt like the most basic reason. Like they wanted to help each other with their dating lives. I don't know. It was just almost too cliche and predictable. I will say I did like both our female and male main characters in this book. They are both sunshiny characters, which I really like because I tend to not like reading about a grumpy character. So I did like the sunshine trope. It was really sweet and I was rooting for both of them. I did like them both individually and together. The spice I thought was unexpectedly really good in this book. I wasn't expecting to like it as much as I did because I didn't really like it in book 2, but it worked for me in this book. I liked how it was written. I think another thing for me is this book really just had no plot to it aside from the trope to try to carry it along. I think what I've noticed in this series is that book 1 had a really strong storyline, but books 2 and 3 have both kind of felt like it's riding on the coattails of book 1 because that one really set up the world, set up the characters, set up the story, and I felt like book 2 didn't have a strong plot, and I felt the same way about book 3. It's just kind of, like I said, riding off the wave of book 1. So I don't know, there wasn't much substance as far as the plot line goes, and I would have liked to see a little more, but I didn't actively dislike it the way I felt about book 2. I will go into book 4, which is going to be the fall book that just came out. I have heard really good things about that one, and I'm excited to read about those characters, but I don't know how I feel about it. We'll just have to see. Okay, and then I read Heartbones by Colleen Hoover. This book I've always heard recommended for summer because it's supposed to be like the show Outer Banks, and I feel like that was very accurate. I was really glad I picked this up and read it in the summertime. In this book, we follow Bea and Samson. Bea has a really rough upbringing. She is going through a lot. This book is very emotionally heavy, so I would look up trigger warnings before if there are things you're sensitive to because it went a lot deeper than I was expecting it to. But Bea ends up going to stay with her dad for the summer, who she really doesn't have much of a relationship with at all. They really are kind of strangers. They don't know one another too well. But when she's there, she ends up connecting with the guy who lives next door to her dad named Samson. Bea and Samson are seemingly so different. Samson lives this very like rich bougie lifestyle, very privileged, whereas Bea came from a really rough upbringing, very poor, not a lot of money, has had to really scrounge by and work for every little thing that she's had. But they are both keeping secrets from one another. They kind of agree that they're going to share them and reveal them at the end of the summer, and until then it follows their relationship and their connection. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel going into another Coho book because I feel like a lot of people can relate to Colleen Hoover Hoover being the author that got them back into reading, especially during the pandemic. I know she like blew up on TikTok. She was the author everyone was talking about, everyone was reading. Her books are just so bingeable, entertaining, and easy to read, and I really fell in love with her books. She definitely got me back into reading, but she has gotten a lot of criticism, especially lately, which everyone is entitled to their opinion, so if you don't like Colleen Hoover, that's fine. I was questioning it. I was like, you know, I have read a lot of books since last reading Colleen Hoover, so maybe she won't be for me anymore. And I'm so happy to report that I really enjoyed this one. I ended up giving it 4 stars. Colleen's writing really just pulls you in. I think her stories are so entertaining and she does suspense so well. There's always something in her books that you are trying to uncover and find out, and it makes me read the book so quickly, and they're so fast paced. There are a few things in her books that, yes, are cringy, but to me, I'm just enjoying the story and the characters so much that I can overlook that, and I don't really care because I'm having a good time. I will say I did think this book was building up to more of an intense reveal. Like, I thought more was going to happen than what did happen, and the ending did feel a little bit rushed, but I still enjoyed how everything wrapped up at the very end, and I liked the message of the book a lot, and overall I had a good time following these characters. Then I listened to the audio of I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. This is one that I see so many good things about, and the premise sounded so interesting. Basically, we're following this group of women who live underground in this bunker, and it's guarded by these men, and all of the women except for one, our narrator and main character, they remember life outside of the bunker. They don't necessarily know how they got in this situation, but they do remember life before and outside of this bunker, whereas our main character and narrator is a lot younger than the rest of the women in the group, so her whole life has been spent in this bunker, and it's really all that she knows. So everything that she has learned and knows about the world has been taught to her through these women. The premise sounded so interesting, and the way people describe this book, everyone says it's so haunting and it's one of those books that's going to stick with them forever. I was just expecting to really love it, and it was super short and quick and easy to listen to, so I was really excited about it, but unfortunately it did not work for me at all. I ended up giving it 2 stars. I was so in it at first. I was so invested in our main character and the story, and I was really liking the themes of womanhood and how really great things can happen when women bond together. I just thought it was so deep and it was going to be so interesting, but then it ends up taking a turn and it just got really repetitive, really slow, really boring. I was still motivated to finish it out to the end because I had all these questions, but I found the ending to be so disappointing because I was just left with more questions than answers, and I felt like it didn't really clear anything up for me. It didn't really answer any of the questions that I had. I feel like a lot of the big themes I understood, but a good bit of it just kind of like went over my head. I felt like this book could have gone in so many different directions, and the direction that it took was the most boring one, and so when it started getting very repetitive and dragging out, I just lost interest and I stopped caring. And then, like I said, the only reason I was invested was to find out the reason why these things were happening, and the ending didn't give me the closure that I wanted. So unfortunately, didn't work for me. I know a lot of people say that this is one of those books that's so haunting, it's just gonna stick with them forever and they're gonna think about it every single day. That was not the case for me. I feel like I'm never gonna think about this book again. So unfortunately, it didn't work for me, but I know a lot of people love it. So if you're one of those people, I'm happy it worked for you. And then I listened to the audiobook of The Fury by Alex Michaelides. He is the same author as The Maidens and The Silent Patient. This is his latest release. It's not super new anymore. It came out, I think, in January. So it's been out for a bit, but still his latest release, and I wanted to give it a try in the summer because the setting takes place on this Greek island, so it just sounded perfect for the summertime. In this book, we follow our main character, who is this retired movie star named Lana. She and her group of friends end up going out on this trip to this private Greek island that she owns for a little getaway, and when they're there, there is a murder that takes place, so we're trying to find out who was murdered and who did it. I gave this one 3 stars. I feel like the audiobook narration, I don't know if I necessarily clicked with it. It's done in a way where the narrator breaks the 3rd and 4th wall, and he tries to pull you in and act like you're besties, and he's telling you this story, and it was interesting, but like I said, I don't think I really clicked with the narration style. It definitely had a lot of potential. Like, I loved the setting and the cast of characters were really interesting. At first I thought it might kind of go in like a White Lotus type of direction. It was giving me those kind of vibes, but I don't know, it wasn't super interesting. I felt like it could have been a little little bit more elevated, and it just didn't go that next step further that I feel could have made it an even better and deeper and more interesting story. I was a little bit disappointed at first because I definitely predicted the climax of the book, but the very end I didn't see coming, and I thought it was really well done. I wouldn't necessarily say this thriller is like super fast paced and thrilling. To me, it was definitely a little bit slow and boring in some parts, and I was kind of ready to just get on with it and figure out what was going to happen. But it was interesting. It did keep my interest the whole time. I didn't dislike it really. Just again, not one of my favorite things. I don't think I'm going to think back on it too much. Then I read The Friend Zone by Abby Jimenez. This is the start to her Backlist trilogy, so I think it's actually her debut novel. I love Abby Jimenez so much. She's become one of my favorite authors. I've rated everything by her so highly. My favorite book that I've read this year is actually Just for the Summer by her, so I knew I wanted to read all of her books. This book in particular I know is a lot of people's least favorite by her, but I still wanted to give it a try with how much I loved her other books, but I wasn't expecting to love it very much, if I'm being honest. This book follows Kristen and Josh, and one day they get into a little fender bender. Josh runs into the back of Kristen's truck. When they pull over, they are like bickering back and forth. Kristen is very upset because it is her best friend's fiance's truck that he let her borrow for a little bit. Come to find out, Kristen is the maid of honor in the best friend's wedding. Josh is also the best man in the same wedding, and he is best friends with the fiance. So that's how they come into one another's lives, and they start spending more time together. And there are definitely a lot of complicated factors that keep them from being with one another, but it does follow their relationship. I was, like I said, expecting to not necessarily love this book too much. I thought it would be like a solid 3-star read for me. Definitely had to give it a try though, because I love Abby Jimenez so much. I really love this one. I think for now I'm settling on a 4.5-star with my rating, but I wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did. At first I thought Josh was going to be a very different male main character to the other men that she writes, because he was coming off a little bit more grumpy, but the more I got to know him, I was like, no. This is a classic Abby Jimenez male main character. I love the men that she writes. Her female main characters can definitely be a little bit frustrating, but I do find them to be very realistic. And the things that Kristen was going through it here definitely can be very triggering to some people, so I would look up trigger warnings. But it was just so emotional, so heartfelt, so deep. The way she writes her characters, they just feel so real because of all the things that they're going through. This book was such an emotional roller coaster. The thing that I thought was going to be the main conflict was just like the tip of the iceberg, because there was so much to this book. I was crying. Abby Jimenez does that though. She has you crying, she has you laughing, she has you swooning, but it makes her books so well-rounded, I think, and so complex and so deep, and that's why I love them so much. The banter between Josh and Kristen was so good. I was laughing out loud. The tension between them, oh my gosh. I will say at the start of the relationship I was a little bit iffy on it, because there's something in here that I was like, I'm rooting for them to be together, but at the same time I'm not. I don't want to give anything away. That was one of my hesitations with rating this book higher. I was also really frustrated with the conflict in here. Like, it definitely got very dragged out towards the end, and the communication definitely could have been a little bit better. I understood from Kristen's point of view where she was coming from, but at the same time I did get frustrated, and I felt kind of like Josh just deserved better, but I still just really loved the story overall. I thought it just had everything that I want in a romance novel, and I cannot wait to continue on with the next book in this trilogy. I'm really curious, knowing the character that it follows, how it's gonna go based on what happened in this book. So I think it's gonna be another emotional roller coaster. But I have heard the book 2 in this trilogy is like the fan favorite, so I am very excited, but this just confirmed for me how much I love Abby Jimenez and her writing so much. So those are all the books that I read in the month of August. As always, comment below. Let me know if y'all read any of these books before, what your thoughts are on them. I would love to discuss. Let me know what y'all read in August, what you liked, what you didn't like. Anything you want to comment below about your reading month, please let me know. If you enjoyed the wrap up, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and make sure you are subscribed to my channel by hitting the red button down below if you're not already, so that you don't miss out on any of the reading vlogs that I have planned for the upcoming month of September. I am very excited for another month of a reading. Thank you guys again for watching, and I will see you so soon in the next one. Bye guys.